Hi guys, welcome back to Tigara Gitana. My name is Abby and today we're going to be talking about retrogrades. And I wanted to make this video because everybody's currently freaking out about retrogrades. And just to give you guys like general information, how it affects your natal chart, your transits, your general energy, and just to help you understand what it actually means. When people mention retrogrades, when people blame retrogrades, and when it just comes up during any astrology, anything that you'll be doing. So one of the biggest things that people note, and I have my notes on the iPad, so I'm going to be reading from here. One of the things people always pretty much bring up when they talk about retrogrades, it's like the planet's moving backwards, it's slowing down, and so the energy turns, instead of it being forward movement, it goes back in, and that's really the way that you should try to see where a retrograde is. It relates to you as a person and the energy, because a lot of it has to do, will end up manifesting through society, through different people in different ways. It is definitely reevaluating past things. So the energy is slower, and the way I like to see it is planetary therapy. That's like what the words that came to me while I was writing this, because that's really what it is. You're taking it time to reflect back instead of completely pushing forward to like, okay, I'm gonna get a house. I'm like, my goal is getting a house in 2 years. I'm still saving for that. Like, it's not about forward movement. It's about past reflection and addressing past things. So we're gonna go through it. Things that you should know is that the moon and the sun do not go on retrograde ever. That's just something that you should know. Okay. So retrogrades are a time to reflect on past issues, choices, past karma, past lives, past loves, past ideas, past goals, past passions. But I'm saying this very generally because it can affect past ideas from when you were like 5 years old and you really wanted to have your own, like, I don't know, pet shop or something, to a past life where you really wanted to, I don't know, have your own restaurant or like cook. All you wanted to do was cook and you couldn't do it. And if that planet is on retrograde in a specific placement, that could mean that that's what you need to readdress now. So just because it's like past issues doesn't mean that it's something that's in this life. And another thing to note is that it also deals with ancestor work. When you are talking about retrogrades and you're looking at past and you're looking at past lives and stuff like that, you are also need to remember that has to do with ancestor work as well, because there might be something within your family that you need to revisit, especially when it comes to families that are like families that were known to do the same type of thing. There's some placements that will need you to readdress that same thing in a different way. If it's like Uranus placement, then it needs you to upgrade the old thing. So if your family, for example, if they invented something, and you have like Uranus in retrograde or something like that, maybe you need to update that invention in a more modern sense. Maybe you need to bring it to this century. So that's kind of ways where it can come up, as far as like doing ancestor work, as it manifests in the physical realm or the, spiritual realm, whichever. It definitely, while working with this, you really need to pay attention to when it might have to do with ancestor work as well. And I'm gonna go through it and mention parts where it could be also ancestor work that you should be doing. So we're going to go into the first one, which is Mercury. So it's like everybody's favorite retrograde. Okay, let me stop. Mercury retrograde deals with past choices, past thoughts, past contracts, past relationships, technology, So the way that comes into play is that, like, for example, like, let's talk about technology. I mean, I did speak on this a little bit when I was talking about Uranus energy, but basically the way that Mercury will mess up technology, it's about communication from point A to point B of whatever the thing. So the way I explained it before is that if you have a cable of a device that needs to be connected to the wall, that connection from A to B, that is the connection that Mercury rules, because they're communicating. The wall's communicating with the cable that's communicating with the device in order for it to run. So Mercury messes up technology during Mercury retrograde, and has these glitches and these, like, kind of like addressing it's not, it's almost like you can't really explain why it happens. It just has its own issues. If you were looking at it through Uranus, it's because Uranus energy would want you to upgrade the thing. So, like, for example, if you, that device that you were trying to connect with the whole mercurial energy, Uranus would want you to update it instead of trying to make it work. It's like, okay, well, you know what, you've been kind of trying to make this work for a while, you've been using this for a while, maybe it's time for an upgrade. And that's the way Uranus will come in. Mercury will just kind of come in and have a glitch and mess up in a way. And in many ways, it could mean that it's time to upgrade it as well. Because if you look at Mercury, and we did talk about it in the Mercury video as well, was that Mercury is the messenger of the gods, and you have to see this as the planets as well. So he's the one that allows you to get the downloads from the rest of the planets. Without Mercury, you will not be able to understand the rest of the energy that we're going to be discussing today. As far as the rest of the planets, you just won't be able to understand why the energy is doing a certain thing, why something's not working, why you're getting frustrated, why it's just, you won't be able to understand it. That process comes from Mercury. And so maybe the reason why so much technology stops working during that time is because you're getting those Uranus downloads that you need to change the device or something. Because I know a lot of people's cars break down. it's a whole thing. So maybe it's time to get a new car. So that's Mercury retrograde. So Mercury retrograde also addresses let's talk about the elephant in the room, which is exes. And I feel like this is the one that people are like, bye. And this is the way you should really see it, and this is the way I've always seen it, but a lot of people just get frustrated that it just exists, so they just kind of ignore it. But you have to see it this way. You are your own person, right? And you're having your own experiences. If you have an ex, they're also their own person, and they're having their own experiences. These transits happen to all of us. The energy is there to all of us. So the way it manifests on to you might not be manifesting exactly the same way somebody else is processing it. So for example, if you are so sure that you do not want to be calling that ex, that you're like over, you've already handled your business, is not even in your mind, you're trying to process a different thing during Mercury retrograde, a different thought, a different idea, revisiting old contracts, revisiting old writings, works, whatever it is, and this person hits you up and says, hey, I've been thinking about you, or whatever, that means that on their side there's some sort of healing that they need to do, because retrogrades, a lot of it has to do with healing, a lot of it has to do with addressing something internally. So for them, there's something on their side that they need to heal, which is why they are the energy of Mercury pulling and going inward and pulling back in is pushing them to address whatever that is, to clear up that karma, to clear up the energy, to clear up, to just have closure on levels. And that's important, because just because you have your closure doesn't mean that somebody else does. So I don't ever, anytime like it's Mercury retrograde and I get hit up by an ex, I'm just like, well, I mean, this energy manifests in different ways, and that's the way I like to process it. I like to understand it. I feel like it's like my Gemini moon, that duality helps me understand both sides, even though like I don't want the person to hit me up. At the same time, I can understand why that conversation needs to happen and why certain things need to be said. Might not be the best experience, but it is something that's beneficial. on an energetic level, because then that energy is not like lingering. That's not like karma that you need to carry. That's like it's been dealt with in this lifetime. So when it comes to Mercury retrograde, don't just brush off your exes. I'm just saying. Pay attention to contracts and things that you're signing, because you never know how that can manifest later on. If you're doing internal work and then you're like end up signing something that will affect you forward moving when you're supposed to be analyzing something in the past, that's not necessarily a good idea. And this is why people say not to sign. Astrologers would be the first to tell you not to sign anything during Mercury retrograde, because it might not actually benefit you moving forward. And once Mercury turns direct and starts moving forward again, you might not see, you might see how that choice was a mistake. Also past choices, which is, I mean, this has to do with a lot of, you have to look at the mind. There's a lot of things that we might have regretted doing, and again, one of the ways that this manifests is through exes, which is why I brought it up as relationships. But this can manifest in many different ways. You could have lied about something. You could have reacted to something in the wrong way, and it could, that a similar situation can come back around that mimics that same situation for you to address it differently. There's a lot of lessons to be learned during Mercury retrograde, and also Mercury retrograde is like a really good time to do ancestor work, because it's the planet of communication. So communicating with ancestors, doing past life meditations, working with like deities are like great time to do so during Mercury retrograde, because you'll have the energy of processing something internally. So when you have that mercurial energy and you are working with these internal mind concepts, you have to understand that during that time, it's not necessarily a huge time to socialize, because you are supposed to be just it's like taking a break. It's like going on a retreat and just taking a break for a couple weeks, and like, I have some stuff I need to work on, and just working on yourself. And so whatever that comes up in your mind during Mercury retrograde, I wouldn't take that lightly. I would take that very strongly. Any dreams that you have are very important during Mercury retrograde. Because they could be messages from your subconscious, and again, that goes into Neptune energy, and we will talk about that. But there are things that could be popping up that you need to resolve, that could be messages coming in your dreams, choices that you made in the past. Maybe something's haunting you. There's certain things like this need to get addressed, and Mercury retrograde is a perfect time to do so. So don't ever be afraid of Mercury retrograde, as much as people love to make it seem like it's the worst thing in the world. Is actually a really, really great time. So the next one is Venus retrograde. And Venus retrograde, I wrote, revisiting past loves in this lifetime or another, problems enjoying Venus energy of love, how you want to be loved versus how you are loved. So this is actually fun for me to talk about, because I actually have Venus in retrograde. And that's actually my natal chart placement. And what I've found is that in this life, I've had to definitely heal past life, like love relationships. And it's not necessarily the funnest thing, because having Venus in retrograde often makes you look, it's kind of like it's kind of like how people release all these love songs throughout life. Like, I'm just gonna explain. I have Venus in Aquarius in retrograde, by the way, so this is gonna be super futuristic in ways, but it's kind of like you listen to all these songs, all these love songs continuously come out, but you never connect to it the way that people sell it to you. And that might have been a little bit confusing, but that's kind of the way that I feel about it. Like, I feel like people will never understand how deep it's supposed to be. And then different placements in having Venus in retrograde can take that up a notch, or like smooth it out a little bit. And I say this because if you have like Scorpio and Venus in retrograde, and you have like just a lot of more like Cancer and Venus in retrograde, and you're dealing with a lot of water energy, that gets a lot heavier, because then that idea becomes like a huge emotion of nobody understands how to love me as deep. It's like, how deep can you? Do you even understand how deep? It's the depth of it is completely becomes the focus of how superficial love people make love to be versus how it is and how it shows itself. So it's a relationship with love energy, and Venus in retrograde forces you to really come to terms with your heart chakra. It focuses a lot on it, and come to terms with what your relationship with love is, how you love. Is it toxic? Are you possessive? What are your actions during love? How do you treat people? What do you think love is? What is the energy of love to you? Why do you need it to feel a certain way? There's a lot of it, and all these questions are things that you are constantly having to kind of learn. These are lessons. Like, these questions that I'm asking are lessons that you'll have to learn during Venus retrograde, because your relationship with not only love but money, because Venus also rules that, will be a little bit shaky in parts, and you'll always have to revisit that relationship, and how you feel about it, and why people glorify it, and what is it that you feel, because ultimately this is internal work. So that means that you have to internalize into love work and self-love work yourself, because the way you love yourself might also be a factor into this. In regards to how it affects past loves, I have had to do past loves, really like relationship work with having Venus in retrograde in my chart. It's not necessarily the funnest thing to do, because then you don't know who you meet, who are supposed to help, who is really supposed to help you through that journey. I got actually really lucky. Me and my boyfriend have a healing past life karma placement, which is really nice. But it's not necessarily the funnest thing to do, because you're literally going to be meeting past loves throughout your life, and there's a healing that needs to come from that, and you'll be needing to cut some karmic cords with it, and you'll be needing to focus on why your connection was the way they was, and you would need to do a lot of deep meditations, past life meditations, pay attention to your dreams. Like, one of my exes, I would dream about that person in a specific lifetime, and it was very interesting how it went down, like, and I would just constantly have that dream over and over again, and it was super vivid, super clear. I pretty much saw the whole entire journey of the thing, but by the end of it, I realized that it wasn't really, it was just, it felt like it was something different. So it's like, at that point I had to define it. I was like, what was this love? And it's like processing it and going through the motions of processing it, and on my side too, because cutting cord with someone that doesn't, because you also have to deal with the fact that someone might not also understand what their connection to you is. So they can understand that there's something there, but they might not actually process it as well as you can if you are the one processing it. This is also a placement that could be hard to work with if you jump to conclusions a lot. And I say this because you can easily have this placement and then walk through your life and be like, oh my god, you must be a past life love. It doesn't have to be. But your connections with people, you'll have a harder time connecting with people who don't have specific retrograde placements, who don't have to do like past work. You'll have a harder time falling for people who are, again, moving forward, who don't have any retrograde planets, because you are doing internal work. So you do need to connect with someone that has their own karma to deal with as well, and healing will come from that. I hope you guys understood that. If not, email me and then we'll talk about it. But that was Venus. With Mars, Mars deals with revisiting passions and disappointments, failures, and what came to me while I was like writing all this down was trying to reinvent the wheel. And the reason why Mars, I picked Mars for that phrase specifically, was because Mars has to do with drive, it has to do with passion, how you love. It also deals with sex in many ways. Having Mars retrograde means that you can be trying to do the same thing the same way that it's already been done over and over again, and it just doesn't work. It doesn't budge. And that placement can be frustrating because you could be very passionate about something but then not see the fruition of it. So if you're like a singer or something, and for some reason I'm getting this, that's one of the things that just came to me. If you're a singer and you have a beautiful voice but you cannot make it in the business of singing, even if you're classically trained, you could literally have everything in check and you would still not see proper fruition with this. And that's really when you have to look at the rest of your chart and see how it balances out what you are supposed to be focusing on, not just moving from a place of like everybody's done it, I could do it too, like having like a mentality that you can beat your way through the wall. It's not gonna work well at all. It's just not. So trying to reinvent the same wheel, if anything, doing it in a different way. Mars in retrograde in a good way could mean that you can take from an era and replicate it and be known for it. So if you, for example, I'm gonna just bring her up because that's another person that came to mind, Dita Von Teese, how she just kind of is her own like time, like she just went back in time and just took from that era, and now she carries that era forward in that way. That might be something that you might need to do, focusing on an era and carrying over that style, not historically letting something die necessarily. It definitely will have its up and downs, I would say. That's a rough placement because that means that your passions will always kind of have a little bit of friction, which is not always fun. Jupiter in retrograde focuses on internal expansion, spiritual growth, connection to higher knowledge, understanding, and concepts. So that one's a little bit fun. Not all retrogrades again are horrible, but having Jupiter in retrograde really, really focuses on the self. You might actually not want to really hang out with a lot of people having that placement because Jupiter in retrograde really focuses on you. If you have Jupiter in retrograde in like the sign of Leo, that's a little bit of an interesting placement to work with because there are kind of certain signs that will amplify the energy or contradict it in ways, and so there might be internal expansion and spiritual growth and the ability to understand something in a way that some might not, but at the same time explaining that to people can make you seem completely nuts, depending again what sign you have in that placement. So you could be super innovative and creative and like you understand so quickly, but then at the same time people won't understand you the same way you get it. Like you'll get it, but other people might not, and that depends again on the sign placement for that. For Jupiter retrograde, it's a beautiful placement though. I definitely will say it's a very beautiful placement, and if having water in there, very, very focused on spiritual. Any water placement on that, very spiritual, very intuitive, able to see people's intentions very clearly and people's wounds very clearly. When you have a Jupiter in like it's focused on the self, you can also focus on other people's personalities deeper than people will, so you'll be able to understand people and get people deeper than some might. So Saturn retrograde deals with karma, past life karma, addressing limitations and lessons, and it's really a second chance to fix karmic debt. So when it comes to this, it's like you're being reborn, and you kind of have a second chance of addressing something, whether it's a lesson, whether it is just life energy, whether it's an idea, whether it's the way something should have happened. I kind of like to think of this as almost like the butterfly effect. If something happened before that you didn't get to finish, or that because of some other sort of events, and it just it needs to still come through energetically and manifest in the physical realm in some level, that's that Saturn retrograde. Fixing past life karma, definitely a focus, and fixing karma, period. So that's that one's a harsher placement to have, because when you're working with Saturn retrograde, Saturn being direct in retrograde, he is just as brutal in both sides. So he will check you in both sides. It's just that in this side, instead of checking you future-wise, so for example, Saturn direct, you've been eating horribly for the past 10 years, and then you just got really sick, and now you have to deal with this disease for like into whatever time, if you do get to heal it or not. Saturn in retrograde, you could be born with a disease that then you need to constantly go back and heal, or if you can't heal, you have to deal with throughout your life. Uranus retrograde, this one I actually wrote reinventing the wheel versus that Mars that we were talking about. So actually reinventing the wheel, taking old concepts and upgrading them, will find freedom in being unique and allowing self-innovation. So Uranus retrograde on direct, again, it still has that progressive energy to it. It still has that like update this, like change this, connect this, but Uranus retrograde could literally mean upgrading something, not necessarily inventing something new to help society, but something in the past that's been working in society just fine, needing to now be upgraded for the benefit of society. That's, if that makes sense. And it's just about bringing old concepts into whatever generation and making it either easier to be understood and definitely needing to be understood better. Like if there's an easier way to do math, or there's an easier way to learn something, learn that language, fly. Is there a faster way to fly? Can we change the system? That's what that energy would like constantly have to revisit. Neptune retrograde deals with the subconscious mind. Dream world can reveal a lot about them. Can easily fall for illusions. Intuition is can't easily fall for illusions. That's one. Intuition is clear. So Neptune in retrograde is really cool because you can really have, when Neptune is direct, he's a little bit more that illusion goes hand in hand. So that's a part of his energy, a part of the energy that like comes forward when he's direct. That is not always fun, because you never know where something's too good to be true or not. When Neptune is retrograde, you'll be able to clearly see what is too good to be true. Your intuition is a lot clearer, especially if you have Neptune in a water sign in retrograde. You'll be able to see people's intent very clear as well. You'll be able to tap in the subconscious and into subconscious moments. You'll be able to see when someone's acting out of whatever it is that they're acting out of, whether it's ego, whether it's like selfishness, whether it's trying to manipulate a situation. Neptune retrograde, it's really like eyes wide open. I can see you what this is. This is BS. You'll be able to really see. which is a nice placement. You'll have a deep connection with the dream world as well. Neptune being direct, you also have a deep connection with the dream world, but with it retrograde, your dream world can reveal a lot about what's going on with your subconscious, where your wounds are. So you'll be able to do a lot of self work and self healing, because your body and your energy and your spirit will be telling you what you need to work on. So that's actually a very beautiful placement to have. And then we got to Pluto in retrograde. So Pluto in retrograde will have to readdress lessons throughout lifetimes in order to transform and learn lessons, and also can indicate passed down spiritual gifts as well, depending on the sign placement as well. If it's a water sign, full show. If it's depending on the sign, if it's an earth sign, it could be a passed down skill. These things can manifest in different ways as well. So maybe you've gotten a certain gift or a certain thing that your family it's been passed down through generations, something like that. This is something that would make you carry on that mantle. But definitely learning lessons through transformation, including past life as well. It could have a deep connection to history, sex, as well as the way sex is seen and interpreted, and healing through that as well. Pluto retrograde could also, because this can be really dark, or like it depends really on the person and the person's experiences. Pluto retrograde can be very traumatic as well. It can have very deep traumatic experiences in regards to sex, in regards to lessons, in regards to taboos, in regards to things that you might have wanted to experience that ended up being a lesson versus an experience, because it can be both. So it can be good and both. Not the easiest thing to have as far as having it in retrograde. There will always be a need to look backwards into your transformations, and also knowing which house this falls in would just tell you exactly what's always going to come up for you. If it's like if Pluto falls over your 7th house, for example, then you'll always have to revisit relationship problems, and your lessons, if it's in retrograde, will come from different people, different relationships, different moments, things that you should have said different. You'll always have to be open into understanding, and knowing that about yourself can help heal you and make you stronger ultimately. So I hope that this was helpful. I hope that you guys found this helpful, and if you guys have any questions, feel free to leave me a comment or message me. And yeah, let me know what you guys think. I hope that you guys are not as afraid about retrogrades. I know that we have 6 this summer. It's fine. I would say just look at your transits and see what the energy or what you should be working on, what comes up for you. Be open. That's really the thing about retrogrades. Kind of fearing it is what makes it a horrible experience. If you're open to it, then you'll be just fine, and you'll be able to heal yourself through the process. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I will see you guys next video. My links will be down below, and yeah, have a blessed day.